I'm Segundo Velasquez, and I am originally from Bolivia, and I met an ex-Peace Corps volunteer. Her name was Joan, and she happened to be placed in or assigned a task in Bolivia.
Terry Sack. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Bolivia from 1963 to 65. And my story is about swimming in one of the interior rivers in Bolivia and swimming with the piranhas. I had a Bolivian girlfriend and we were in the water, and she said there was things nibbling on my fingers and toes. And I said, well, what's that? And she said, oh, that's nothing to worry about, just those are just some piranhas. She said, what you need to really worry about is stepping on electric eels, because those will give you a big shock, and that's really bad. And probably with all of us here in the water right now, there won't be any alligators or crocodiles that come and bother us. And the water was murky. It was typical jungle water, brownish, brackish, so you couldn't see in it, but you knew those little suckers were down in there. And about the time that she said, oh, don't worry about it, don't be a wuss, so on, she jumped up out of the water. We were only in waist-deep water, and a piranha had taken off a little mole. She had on a two-piece bathing suit and plucked that mole off of her bathing suit. And I was like, am I going to stay in here and be a man, or am I going to run and get the heck out of the water? So I decided to be the macho man, and I hung in there with the piranhas. And that's my story. Oh, thank you.
Nancy Peterson. I was in Bolivia with an agricultural heifer project group from 1964 to 66. A couple of the exciting things that happened right after we arrived was the revolution with General Rene Barrientos, and a couple months later I got married to a fellow volunteer.
I'm Mike Bloom. I was in Bolivia from 1964 to 1966, living in Tuquipaya, which is a small town, was a small town outside of Cochabamba, and I was working in the National Rural Community Development Program.
Hello, my name is Lana Pelton Bloom. I was in Bolivia in 1964 to 66. Lived in the Cochabamba Valley for a year, in the town of Colcapirua, and then in Villa Serrano for a year. Worked with the nation's only dairy at that time with the Heifer Project, and then worked with the Community Development Project at a teacher training school in very rural Chuquisaca.
Dennis Zambala, and I was in Bolivia 28. The road to our town was featured on Nova a couple of years ago, maybe it was last year, in an episode called The Road of Death. And it snaked in and out of these river valleys. It was a dirt road. Every once in a while it would drop off, and there'd be, people be killed. It's a one-lane road. And I came to the Transito stop, which is like a customs place in the road. And I saw another Peace Corps volunteer sitting there, sort of hunched over. And it turns out he had been in a Jeep going up to La Paz, and he pulled over in this wide spot, and the road just gave way beneath his wheel. And the Jeep flipped over and landed on its top on a ledge about 50 or 75 feet below. Then the rest of the Jeep ripped off and went down another 1,000 feet, and he was left there in the top of the Jeep. So they had fished him out, and so we really didn't know any better. We took him back. Probably should have been airlifted out, because it turned out he had broken a couple of vertebrae. But he was in pain the whole way back up to La Paz. He was lucky to be alive.
My name is Stacy Rhodes. I actually went by Bill Rhodes at the time. It was 1968, and I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Bolivia. We learned a lot. I learned that while I taught the men how to shear their sheep, it was actually the women that controlled the family purse. And I should have been paying more attention to the women. It was actually my first lesson in women in development, because when the men wanted to buy a pair of shears, they had to go to their wife to get the money. And so when these guys weren't buying sheep shears to follow up on the lessons, I asked them why. They said they didn't have the money. I said, well, where's the money? It was a very cheap set of hand shears, but they said, you'll have to talk to my wife. So I finally figured out that we needed to focus on the women.
Richard Engen. I was in Peace Corps Bolivia, 1968 through 1971. I had a chance to live 2 years in Tarija, which is a town of about 25,000 people. It's 250,000 people now. And 1 year in Santa Cruz, which was about 100,000 people, and now it's 1.5 million. We went back a couple of years ago, and each of those locations are significantly different than I remembered them in the 60s and 70s. I can remember irrigation canals. We surveyed some. The only place they would need help would be around mountains. The rivers would go a serpentine pattern, and sometimes they'd want to tunnel from through the mountain one side rather than go the long way around. So all we would do is put a marking on the downhill side so they could build a tunnel from both sides. And then they would climb down a rope from on top with a hammer and chisel and set dynamite, put a fuse, and crawl up the rope, light it and climb up the rope. Well, these often would want to show that they're a macho and they're frugal. And they all knew how to use dynamite because of the mines in Bolivia. But they would not, it'd be a contest to see who could light the shortest fuse. So you'd crawl down the rope, light the fuse, and you have to crawl up the rope and lay over the side of the cliff before it blows. And I had no problem marking the spot for him, but I did not want to get involved with the construction.
I'm Carl Sepinen. I served in Bolivia in 1970, 71. I was stationed down in Tarija, Bolivia, down in the southern part of Bolivia. I was a construction supervisor down there. And the item I remember most vividly is one day when I was in Bolivia and working on a construction project, and I had to ask a guy down in an excavation how thick the concrete was that we had just poured, and I handed him the tape measure, the ruler, and he measured it. And I said, how thick is it? How many centimeters is it thick? And he held up his ruler and said, that much. And, well, how much is it? I can't see. He said, that much. And then it dawned on me that the guy couldn't read. He was a farmer, campesino farmer, and duh, he can't read. He's showing me what it is. He's answering my question. And that's the thing I remember most vividly.
My name is Margie Haynes, and I was a volunteer in Bolivia, Cupina, Bolivia, from 1998 to 2000. I was a natural resource volunteer. And I ended up working in a tree nursery and did agroforestry as well as some environmental education. I lived on a high plain, a semi-arid plain, sort of in the middle of nowhere, and had a fantastic experience, and it really put me on the path to where I am now of working in the environment.
My name is Ann Zambi, and I was stationed in Bolivia from 1999 to 2001. I was a rural sanitation volunteer, and my village was Chayapata, Oruro. The one thing that I always come back to is after we built a water system in a small village in Livichuco, which was just outside of Chayapata, Coyetuyo. I remember as soon as we turned the water on and the tank filled up, everybody in the village started using the water immediately, and I saw everybody washing their clothes. Of course, they hadn't had water in like a day or two, but the fact that they could all just use their water right away, right outside their house, was like the most exciting part of my whole entire experience.
Okay, my name is Christina Owens. I served in Bolivia from 2000 to 2002. I was in southern Bolivia near the city of Tarija in a small town called Las Carreras. Jasmine Carrillo, and I served in Bolivia and Guatemala 2007 through 2010. One of my favorite stories is when I was hiking up this huge mountain in the town I lived in Bolivia, and we walked up there. It took us like 4 hours to hike up there, and as we were coming down, someone had put their bulls all along the entire mountain, so we had to like creep around the bulls and not upset them or rattle them up or anything, and one of them was after us, and we had to run and book it down the mountain, and as we're running, I fell on top of a cactus, and I had cactus all over me, and I got home, and someone had to pick all the pickers out, and my finger got pretty messed up, and I had to go to a doctor and so I had this really crazy scar on my finger from being chased by a bull in Bolivia, and who gets to say that unless you're in the Peace Corps, pretty much. So that was my story.